well. So thank you, Chris.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Today, I will talk about our work inside of ICICLE, which is called the Smart Fields Project. We're really focused on building cyber infrastructure that supports novel AI and novel AI uses for the application area of biodiversity and animal ecology. A little bit just about ICICLE. This is a relatively large AI institute funded by NSF. We touch every corner of the country. We have researchers that really are working in a transdisciplinary fashion with their core expertise coming from all aspects of AI and CI. So folks that do low-level computer systems and distributed systems work, folks that do machine learning, foundational, I guess that word's not the right word to use anymore, but very fundamental design of AI algorithms and AI methods, as well as folks that are doing cutting-edge applications using novel data streams, etc. It's been a fun journey. Before I get started, I just want to say that this is maybe the caveat. You're in for a doozy when someone says it's their first time giving a particular talk. But I say that in this context to say that this is a group that is incredibly active, and there are a lot of people that are contributing to this work for biodiversity. And I don't have the time to go into all of them. And despite my best efforts, I'm sure I have mistaken or made some mistakes on some of the projects that are ongoing. So off bat, I just want to thank all of the people that are a part of the Smart Fields project. And trust me that this talk will evolve, and we'll continue to grow and keep working in this space. So I want to start by talking about cyber infrastructure, since there are some that I don't know the background of everyone on the call. Let's just provide a general description of cyber infrastructure. When we talk about cyber infrastructure, we're talking about the unique composition of software and hardware to ultimately accomplish some problem, to get some sort of task completed. And so when we talk about the cyber infrastructure, on the software side, we might think about things like AI, specific AI models or frameworks like TensorFlow for performing inference with those models. We may think about more low-level software components like your operating systems, your distributed platforms. And then when we think about it from a hardware side, we might think about the collection. Again, all of these are working together to solve a particular problem. So we may have GPUs involved, we may have CPUs involved, we may have sensors involved. All of this computational framework to solve problems. But whose problems are they solving? And in the end, CI really serves two key roles. First, it gives communities a standard way to use technology to solve their problems. And secondly, in a dual nature, because you're helping communities solve these problems, you're actually informing what problems can be solved. And you ultimately influence how communities are formed and what tools they have access to. So let's talk about a particularly important community, the biodiversity community. When we talk about biodiversity, we're talking about concerns about the variety, health, and security of all species on the planet. And the community of folks that are interested in biodiversity range from researchers, perhaps affiliated with institutions or working in academic environments, as well as practitioners, perhaps working in the field or working in the context of interacting with specific species. And the backgrounds cover things like biology, ecology, forestry as well, agronomy, etc. One key common trait when we talk about biodiversity research is that it's normally, when we talk about the evaluation of biodiversity research, we're evaluating and validating the findings in the field empirically. And that leads to open problems and some opportunities for AI and CI to play a role. So when we think about biodiversity research, there are still some big open questions. How many distinct species live on planet Earth? Still a very hard question to answer. For any one species, what is the population count? How do we go about understanding what that population count might be? Maybe for just one species, where does that species live across the planet? How do we know how that species is using the land that it has access to? More importantly, as we think about climate change, where will that species live in 5 to 10 years? Similarly, what types of abiotic conditions, so outside of the species and outside of the life forms that it interacts with, what aspects of the land or of the planet are affecting the species' ability to thrive and its well-being and security in a particular setting? So let me give you just a concrete example here. Here I'm showing you a picture of David-Pierre deer. And this is a species that is functionally extinct. Originally was found in, I believe, China. And maybe there are 650 wild David-Pierre deer remaining in that area. But in the US, actually, we have one of the largest breeding herds of this deer. It's located at the Wilds, which is a large conservatory in Ohio. And so obviously we would like to understand what we can do to prevent the total extinction of this species. So biodiversity practitioners and researchers are interested in studying and understanding the behavior of this particular species. So when we talk about researchers, obviously we're interested in things like where the species will grow and migrate. And when we talk about practitioners, we can talk about folks at the wild that just wonder whether or not their conservation park is the ideal setting for this particular species. In particular, practitioners are wondering whether or not some of the land that makes up this conservation park that was reclaimed from mining operations are as suitable for this species to thrive as land that was originally just a natural forestry habitat. So how do we answer a question like that? How do we help researchers solve these types of problems? So today, if we look at AI and biodiversity, the way that we go about conducting studies that help advance research is a biodiversity stakeholder, so a researcher or practitioner, has to decide AI is the tool for me. And so I'm going to buy a lot of sensors and possibly get some cloud computing credits, and I'm going to do some investment for a study that I hope is going to help. And in order to sort of execute that study, because remember, when we talk about biodiversity, we're talking about empirical studies that are happening in the field. I need to collect data, so I'm going to try to collect as much data as possible. And then after I've collected that data, I can generate hypotheses that ultimately eventually produce studies that lead to impactful results. The challenge with this pipeline, as you'll see, is that it gets more difficult with each step in the stage. So once I've decided to engage with AI, I have to do some perhaps costly investment in CI, for which I don't necessarily understand. Then I have to do data collection, which again, I'm not sure if I'm collecting the right data or not. And now, after I have this wealth of data, I have the process of trying to prune it and clean it and eventually come up with something that will lead to some impactful results. So what that means is that today, biodiversity researchers are increasingly computationally savvy, aware of how to choose the right sensing modality for a particular study, how to configure and ultimately set up and manage all of those sensors in the field, and then how to take that data, eventually aggregate it, move it to the cloud for processing, and then how to clean it, ideate over it, and ultimately do analysis that leads to results. Now, undoubtedly, this is an academic talk, so it will sound as if I'm being perhaps harsh about the current process, but it is important to say that with that process, we can do some really cool stuff today. We can do species identification. We can do behavior classification. We can do different types of health analysis on different animals. And these are studies that are underway today. So there's great power and opportunity in bringing AI to biodiversity. But here's what AI and CI do not provide for biodiversity research today. It is not democratized. If we were to use the latest technologies in AI, CI, cyber infrastructure support for AI, and cyber infrastructure for efficient sensing, we can greatly reduce the cost of conducting biodiversity studies, alleviate a majority of the manual tasks that ultimately require computational sophistication, and allow us to generate the thing that we're most interested in, which are the biodiversity, the answers to the longstanding biodiversity problems much faster. Today's AI and CI is not plug and play. So if you want to deploy AI and CI in the field for biodiversity research, you do have to do a lot of manual configuration. And this varies for each study that you would like to perform. And it is not use-inspired. So what you're typically doing when you're doing these studies today, you're pulling off-the-shelf tools like drones, sensors, TensorFlow, PyTorch, whatever these may be. And these tools are not really suited toward the dynamic demands for empirical studies in the field. So what we're doing in the Smart Fields project is we're really trying to transform this pipeline. And so this is what we're moving toward, a situation where biodiversity stakeholders, before having to buy a ton of equipment, they can actually interact with tools that help them do capacity planning, thinking about how many sensors do I actually need, how many drones do I need, and then moving the hypothesis generation stage forward. So thinking dynamically about how to deploy that CI while getting data that comes back and ultimately refining the hypothesis as you go in the field, so that you're not stuck cleaning data later, but you're actually collecting the data of interest as you go. And then after you've collected this data, can we also simplify the post-study data analysis, ultimately removing a lot of the work that currently goes into cleaning and scrubbing and getting rid of redundant data, such that we can just supply a prompt that captures the types of studies that we would like to produce, and that will ultimately lead to the impactful results that we're interested in. So what I've highlighted here in blue are the key components where CI and CI for AI are going to play a key role. At the end of the day, hypothesis generation, and determining whether or not we've actually had impactful results for the biodiversity community. These are decisions that have to be made by the community itself. Our job in ICICLE, and specifically within the Smart Fields group, is to support that community with CI and AI. So the ICICLE approach in general is to always think about partnerships and ultimately using cyber infrastructure to help our partners achieve scientific advances that they're looking for. So when we talk about the shortfalls in biodiversity knowledge that I mentioned earlier, we can talk about those with regards to very specific species like Pierre David deer and very specific stakeholders. And eventually, we would like to be able to help address those shortfalls by ultimately producing data sets that allow a wide range of researchers and practitioners to better understand the species that they're working with. We'd like to develop new types of AI that are tailored toward biodiversity research that helps us characterize ecological systems, wildlife behaviors, and social interactions. And we'd really eventually like to move to a place where we have more AI-driven management, specifically conservation practices where we are using data sensed from the field to make informed decisions, for instance, about gating and creating structures for different animals to graze in conservation parks, or coming up with AI-driven approaches to do that sensing in a way that respects the privacy, safety, and security of the animals that you're monitoring. Or even more concretely, looking at it from a capital perspective, how do we decide staffing and management decisions at our conservation centers based on the behaviors of the animals that we're working with? So how do we get there? ICICLE is about creating use-inspired AI-driven CI. And so we are a research outfit, first and foremost, and that research involves doing core research in AI, core research in CI, and research at the intersection of the two. Our three principles are ultimately to create AI-driven CI that is plug and play, that is use-inspired, and that is democratized. And building on the pipeline that I showed you earlier, in Smart Fields, we think about this in 4 stages: stakeholder engagement, capacity planning, adaptive CI deployment in the field, and then post-study data analysis. So in the rest of this talk, I'm going to walk through what it looks like to use different Smart Fields tools and how we engage in this pipeline. So starting with stakeholder engagement, what types of CI we're building there, then talking about capacity planning, what we're doing adaptively for in-field deployment, and then post-study data analysis. I should also say at this stage, if there are at any point questions, feel free to jump in and ask. It is totally fine to interject and interrupt me. I can manage the time accordingly. But if you have a burning question or something like that, I please do not sit on that. Just jump on in and ask, and I can answer it right away. So let's talk about stakeholder engagement. So something that we've been really excited about for really the last couple of years is our partnership with the Wilds. So the Wilds is a private nonprofit safari park and conservation center in Southeast Ohio. It is indeed the largest wildlife conservation center in North America. Working with our partners at the Wilds, we've been able to identify several synergistic interests in biodiversity, where we believe ICICLE's novel CI can ultimately help them in their dual roles as a safari park and as a conservation center. As a safari park, you have to answer questions about, how do I maintain this park? How do I make sure that the animals that we are hosting here live, eat, and play safely and are ultimately able to thrive, that this species is able to thrive for multiple generations? An example here would be the abiotic impact of reclaimed mining lands. On the conservation center side, because this is one of the largest conservation centers in North America, the Wild attracts interest from researchers across the country, really across the globe, who are interested in understanding the social behaviors within species, especially endangered species, like David Pierre deer, and interactions between species as well. So it's a unique opportunity to partner with a really substantial leader in biodiversity. And another leader in biodiversity has been the Imagomics Institute. So the Imagomics Institute seeks to establish this new scientific field called imagomics that ultimately is bringing novel AI to the world of understanding animal ecology and animal characteristics, right? So here, our partnership is really exciting because we are well-versed in ICICLE and CI and how to support advanced AI and what types of hardware and software systems can do that support. And we see ourselves as a contributor to the type of work that Imagomics is doing, where they're looking at advancing the field in terms of AI and creating novel AI models that ultimately give us much deeper understanding of the species that we share this planet with. So one of the visions that we're working on is to use the wilds as a living laboratory. And so here the goal is to ultimately instrument the wilds for high impact biodiversity field studies. And here I'm showing you a proof of concept that we're working on over this summer. So this is the second summer where we've been working with the wilds toward this goal of a living laboratory. The basic idea is over the summer is to just cover a single pasture that's used by David Pierre deer, and ultimately to train several students to lead the field work, where we are planning to deploy 8 different data sensing modalities, from drones to camera traps to acoustic sensors, to ultimately understand how the deer are using the land. In the long term, this is a great example of we have built it and they have come. Along with this proof of concept, we were actually able to take this and build a team of 25 biodiversity experts that have expressed interest in the data that we're going to generate from the study. And so this is now a group that is meeting on Zoom on several times. The group includes folks from leading institutions like Princeton, Yale, and MIT, UPitt as well, and leading organizations as well. What these types of studies do is enable novel approaches for novel AI for biodiversity. So here I'm showing you data that was collected in a previous year from a field study in Kenya. And this led to the CABR data set, which we did in conjunction, ICICLE and imageomics in conjunction together. This data set is this data set was really impactful for ultimately solving problems in AI biodiversity. So I'll just describe two quickly here. So one is that, let's say you see this image of a drone capturing the zebra below, but the zebra are moving, right? So now you would like to be able to track these animals efficiently. If you just grab a drone off the shelf, that drone does have the ability to track an individual, right? Like a human being walking, that can be adapted to an individual animal. But tracking a herd of animals is a little different. How do you go about doing that? And so one of our ICICLE principals, Jenna Klein, had some really nice algorithms about doing tracking across herds in the Autonomic Computing Conference in 2023. Another problem is, okay, I'm tracking the herd, but obviously, eventually these animals will move out of frame. And then they're going to move back in frame. Can we detect which animals we've already seen? Can we do this IDing of animals in real time? And so another interesting study that's emerged from this is animal re-identification from multi-view spatial temporal track clustering. So in this paper, which is a CV for animals and CVPR poster in 2025, you can see this pipeline that's developed for ultimately doing detection, tracking, and then classification to ultimately come back and identify animals. The key result here is that the pipeline is very accurate on a range of data sets composed of different drone videos. And this is software that we plan to release in fall of 2025. Another thing that we have been able to do through these partnerships is enable novel CI for biodiversity. So the exact same tool that I described of how do you track animals, track herds of animals as they move through the field. We've actually embedded that into a software suite that the community now has access and has the ability to download. This is something published in Methods in Ecology and Evolution called WildWing. And so WildWing ultimately is a plug-and-play package that you can download, and it allows you to start tracking herds of animals as they move throughout a field right away. So that's stakeholder engagement. That's engaging with our partners to ultimately find problems of interest. Once we found those problems of interest, we now have this problem of capacity planning. So when we talk about capacity planning today, your biodiversity experts are doing a lot of critical, mission-critical computational resource management. How many camera traps should I place? What types of CPU and camera and network devices should those camera traps use? And maybe even more simply, even if I buy everything else off the shelf and you say I'm limited by cash on everything else, how often do I go back to the field to check the batteries? How long can these actually stay in the field and operate effectively? So we've created this ML Field Planner, and the ML Field Planner ultimately is a capacity planning tool. The idea is to study the performance of camera trap traces using prior camera trap data to study the performance of different model architectures, different hardware architectures, so that we have an idea of how AI models will perform when we push these things into the field. So this is work that we were able to publish at PERC 2025. In fact, I think that the presentation is coming up on it. So you're seeing this slide, I think, maybe 5 days early, a few days early. So what we did was we created this web interface that domain scientists can ultimately use to configure experiments of interest about what types of hardware they would like to use, what types of camera trap data they expect to see streaming into a particular camera trap. And they submit a job. And this job, working through TAPIS, which is an underlying component in the ICICLE reference architecture, ultimately provisions edge IoT hardware and cloud computing software that will match the configuration specified by the scientist. And it simulates the execution of that job on that type of hardware. So scientists can get an idea of what the expected performance will be, what the expected energy consumption will be, allowing you to answer questions like, how often do I need to go out and replace the batteries, given this camera trap will almost never be triggered, or this camera trap is in a highly frequented area, and so it needs to be accessed more often. This is also a tool that will be available, I believe, fall 2025. I don't think we've released this one just yet because it's not yet published. Another thing that you might do is imagine this workload that we are envisioning for field studies. So now, instead of doing all of your capacity planning up front and then deploying, we envision the situation where you have adaptive deployment and dynamic data collection happening in a way that allows you to go back and revise your hypothesis and adjust on the fly, right? How does that change the hardware demands and the demands for dynamic data collection? So we characterized this type of study as an AI-driven animal ecology study. And we think about that in 3 phases. One, there's the design phase where you specify the study objectives, you specify the study parameters. What location are you interested in? What species of interest are you interested in? As well, what types of hardware are you using? What is the AI sensitivity of the different models that you're using on top of that hardware? And then you shift into an execution phase, right? So during this execution phase, you are studying animal dynamics and doing some processing on the fly, from which you are doing, for instance, feature extraction that allows you to do things like track animals, classify animal species in real time, do behavior detection and identification, etc. And while this is going on, you might like to be able to do runtime adaptations. So this is what we mean when we say adjusting our hypothesis. So is it a good idea to relocate where the camera is? Is it a good idea, in order to track this herd, for the drone to move forward so that the herd is in a better space in terms of the view of the camera? What about edge resource management? Should I turn on or off servers, and how does that affect the performance? One of the questions with these types of studies is, well, how fast do we need to be able to do those runtime adaptations? And so what we did was we looked at time-stamped logs of different existing biodiversity data sets, and we conducted the first characterization of service level objectives in that context. And so here I'm showing you several of the studies that we looked at, and ultimately the frames per second and the percentage of requests that need to be completed in a timely fashion in order to answer the research questions that are posed by the study. And so this gives computer system architects an idea about what types of performance characteristics they need to meet in order to ultimately support the workloads in question. So now that's all on capacity planning and maybe a shift toward the dynamic and adaptive behaviors in the field. Let me briefly go through some of the things we're doing with adaptive AI for camera traps. So camera traps are a vital tool for wildlife monitoring. We obviously have the goal of supporting ML-ready testbeds for AI algorithms to advance this very critical workload. So one of the things that we're looking at is, if I am running a camera trap in the field, how do I reliably detect when to update and how to update the camera trap if the things that it's seeing in the field fall outside of the distribution that it was trained on? So a simple pipeline here to think about this process is I'm going to train my model based on some historical data, and that's going to produce a model. And when I deploy that model in the field, I'm going to get new data. And from that new data, I'll have some classification accuracy or some classification ability. But some portion of that new data will fall outside of the distribution of the original training data set. And so what I'd like to be able to do is partition out that out of distribution data, transfer that to a backend server, relabel it, and ultimately provide a feedback loop that allows me to now update my model with more robust labeled data so that my deployment remains resilient. And so this pipeline and the results that I'll show you are things that we were able to publish in CVPR. This is coming from Harry Chow's group. This is also slated for release in fall of 2025. So the key result on this graph is that if you look at our full approach, which is this parameter efficient fine tuning, we do no harm. We are always going to be better than the state of the practice, which is to just do some linear probing to figure out when to ultimately update and retrain your model. But sometimes you can get a relative performance improvement of up to 60x. Last but not least, so that's how we might think about adapting AI in the field. Once we've collected our data set, and now we've collected this data set that is very specific to the different hypotheses and the types of data that we'd like to understand, we have the problem of what to do with the data set that we've collected. I will very briefly touch on just preliminary work that we've been looking at in the field of data set augmentation. So one of the challenges when we talk about post-data collection is that anytime we collect data in the field, we're often dealing with relatively small amounts of data. So we can't deploy things in the field. Maybe that's not the right way to say it. Today, what we often do is we do studies that are short-lived in terms of their lifetime. So we end up with data sets that are relatively small. And what we would like to be able to do is expand those data sets so that our AI can have a more rich and robust set of data to work on and to learn from. And so one of the exciting results is we were able to look at the diffusion process, and we saw that videos created from the diffusion process actually present a lot, use a lot of cycles that are ultimately wasted frames. These are frames that produce data that is not specific or not authentic to the domain in which you're trying to study the animals. And we think that there's this opportunity to see really great speed up gains by reducing the amount of wasted frames that are produced in this process. And our primary contribution in this space is in the area of science agents. So in ICLR 2025, And in Nature News, we presented Science Agent Bench. So Science Agent Bench is a benchmarking tool to ultimately understand how well LLMs can craft code that is designed to answer problems related to various science domains. So here, I want to highlight Science Agent Bench is a ICICLE problem where we are exploring a fundamental AI challenge, and we're looking to fundamentally advance AI through the lens of biodiversity. So here, we're just showing the basic inputs. User comes to an LLM with an instruction, a prompt that they would like to have the LLM generate code for, some data set, and possibly some additional, you can think of it as RAG style domain knowledge that I would like the LLM to consider. The agent interacts with some local files and ultimately produces code. And so one of the keys in order to be able to do a study of different science agents is gathering a wide range of examples of labeled prompts and code, right? So how do I get that? And so what they created was this tool, Auto SDT, and what Auto SDT does is it breaks the process down into 3 stages. First, you search, you crawl relevant GitHub repositories, and from those, you select candidate programs. These programs have, will obviously have dependencies, etc. You turn those programs into standalone executables, and then you go back and you generate the task instruction that would fit for those particular programs. So now you have this additional tool for evaluation. So if I provide a particular task instruction, this is the code that should have been produced. And you can use that both for evaluation and, again, in like a RAG style, as a fine-tuning opportunity to ultimately do your training. And so what we found, this is work coming from Hwan Soon and Yu Su's groups, they were able to ultimately match the performance of GPT-4o just by adding some tuning with Auto SDT across 5,000 examples. This is a tool that we are slated to release also, I believe, fall 2025. This is what it looks like when you're actually using a science agent to ultimately characterize the workload for, to ultimately produce code. There are tools that you can use. There are already examples that you can use. This is for Science Agent Bench. So there are already examples that you can use. You could click on one of these, or you could specify your own task by specifying the task, providing any additional domain knowledge, and uploading a data set. And ultimately, this is what you get is a characterization of the, not a character, is the program that is characterized by your task input. Okay, so I know I've gone through a lot. Let me just try to wrap this up, leaving a little bit of time for questions. The main point here is that the future of biodiversity research is really bright. Here I'm showing you images of some of the students that contributed work that I presented in today's slide set. I want to again highlight this slide set, just due to the limitations of time and my own limitation in how quickly I can talk. I think we showcase less than 50% of our active projects. And even on this slide, I'm not capturing the contributions of many, many students that are working in the smart field space. What's unique about the students that are working in this space is they start from a transdisciplinary space in terms of how to lever AI and how to combine that with novel CI to ultimately advance the field. And we believe that the opportunity for biodiversity research to lever the unique types of skills that these students contain is really exciting. The other thing is these principles are really special. The plug and play, democratization, and use-inspired design ultimately have informed comprehensive breakthroughs across the workflow of biodiversity research. And so now we are able to start thinking about what it means to do studies that have adaptive in-field deployment, what it means to have studies where stakeholders are engaged but do not have to become computational experts. And what does it mean to have studies that are really using the latest state of the art in terms of AI and CI support for novel sensing modalities? We believe that now, with the type of support that we're making available in smart fields, that biodiversity researchers and practitioners are on the cusp of answering long-held knowledge shortfalls in their community. I'm talking about knowing the abundance of a species within a particular area at a particular point in time. This is known as the Prestonian shortfall. We know the Hutchinson shortfall, talking about the impact of abiotic conditions on the health of a species. These are all examples of problems that I've described in this talk that we are actively addressing within the Smart Fields team. And I think the potential is limitless. With that, I'll stop and take questions. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Chris and team. Excellent presentation. And I think Tanya has put some links for the articles. And also many thanks to all the stakeholders, partners who are attending. I'm sure, Chris, if you have any other, questions, I don't know if you want to address them now or.
Yeah.
Oh,
If there are
okay.
any questions, I'm happy to address. Anyone can unmute and ask, or obviously also reach out to me via email if anyone is interested.
Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, this is all really cool and super relevant, I think, in the current time. So at Neon, so at Neon, it's in its original planning, like bioacoustic sensors and camera traps were things that were considered to be implemented at Neon. But at the time, so this was 15 years ago, the technology wasn't there, and scaling to a national observatory wasn't possible. And so we don't have these sorts of sensor systems now, but it's really interesting seeing you're making the tools for capacity planning. All this stuff really speaks to us because we're trying to think about, can we do this stuff now? And then the other wrinkle, of course, is that with the funding cuts from the NSF, it may be more important for us to consider cheaper, more efficient ways to collect biodiversity data. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts about how could we, use what you're learning from the wilds and the other projects, and are there barriers or things that we should pay attention to in thinking about scaling to a national observatory?
Thanks, Eric. Great question. Great question. It is worth saying that Tanya and I were just having a chat about how to engage Neon in next steps moving forward. So I'm greatly appreciative of your question and greatly appreciative of the innovation and boundary pushing that we're building on top of that Neon has already provided. I think adaptive in-field deployment going across multiple modalities is really important for cost reduction. So right now, when we look at sort of the default approach for a wide range of these studies, people just think, how do I collect all of the data possible? And then as long as I know I have the data, I will prune that later. And that's great on the front end, but it misses the really heavy cost on the back end, right? So in this talk, I showed several times the work of Jenna Klein, and she is a great example of someone. She spent several months looking at some data that was collected with that methodology, trying to clean it, trying to figure out what was salvageable, because the system wasn't really dynamic at the forefront. If you are conscientious about what you're collecting, and that means both you're not collecting everything, and two, perhaps most importantly, you're collecting the stuff you want to get. I think the cost up front is a little bit higher because you do have to have the distributed system support, and it does require the types of students that we're talking about here that have the ability to sort of deploy these tools that can then be used plug and play throughout. But once you've sort of done that up front, the second part becomes much easier, right? Even things like doing post-study data analysis in a way that levers LLMs becomes much more feasible, because you don't have a whole bunch of trash data that you have to clean and label and try to figure out what it means, right? You start with things that are already parsimonious, relevant, and useful. That's been my takeaway so far. Maybe that will vary as we keep going, but that's maybe a high-level takeaway, Eric. I hope that answered some of what you were asking.
Yeah, thanks. That's definitely super useful insight. Because yeah, I'll just add that at Neon, as like we're serving the science community, so we don't necessarily know what their science questions are. And our default has always been to like collect and publish as much as we can so that the researchers can decide what they want to use. But like, yeah, this we need to rethink that, probably is what it sounds like you're saying. So that's, yeah, super interesting to hear.
Thanks. Hey, and we'd love to rethink it together. Big W, capital W in we. Alfonso, I saw your post. Did you want to chime in on your post in just the last minute?
I suppose maybe quickly. First of all, though, I'm so proud to be associated with y'all. Tanya, Chris, all the team, all the students who do this work. It's great to be part of the ICICLE work. Mesonets are real interesting things. They exist around the U.S. Climate data. So with respect to how weather and climate change might impact species, I'm confident there are APIs that y'all might consider plugging into to engage a kind of a different temporal scale associated with your work. I didn't grab the Ohio one, the Ohio Mesonet, but I'm sure there's one in Ohio. So thanks.
I don't know if Jenna Klein is online at the moment or not, but I will say that of the 8 modalities that we're covering this summer, we are capturing climate data in particular at the wilds as well. And so
we're not. Just want to make sure we're capturing weather data, not climate. Just to be absolutely clear,
I was going to
weather,
ask Jenna to chime in on that. Yeah, I didn't know if she wanted
I
to
don't
say
know that
exactly
Jenna
what
is
we.
actually on the
Oh, is she not? Okay,
call.
okay.
She's not, but I'm happy to answer the questions.
Yeah.
For What's the Wild, since this is a connection that I facilitated and know kind of maybe the broader scope of the setting of the study of everybody involved and where it can go. They have their own weather station. They have about 10 years of weather collection. They have satellite images for the last, I think, 10 years about at varying resolutions. There is no climate data per se for the location, but it's also too small for climate. There's a broader climate data, of course. This is also, I just want to clarify that the Wild is not a biodiversity research facility. It's a conservation and tourism facility. It's a private nonprofit, but it is it works closely with Ohio State University, and there is a research protocol that's possible. A lot of the projects are managed by OSU. Many of the Wild staff are members of the OSU research community, and it is great staging ground for future research projects and for future biodiversity management projects. So you can test it in an environment which is not wild, not native, not and not protected to the extent that a native ecosystem would be. So you can test a lot of the things before you take them to the native ecosystem.
Shall we log off?
Yes,
We are 2
absolutely.
minutes
Yep.
over.
Yep. Thank you all for attending and good job, Chris. We'll
Thank you,
post
everyone.
the video on YouTube channel. So in case anyone missed it. Thank you all. Have a great day ahead.